I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Capitol grilling. Special counsel Robert Hur faces tough questions from both sides of the aisle in testimony over President Biden's handling of classified documents. Bloodshed in Haiti. Amid another round of violence, the country's prime minister makes a surprising announcement. Elections in Mexico. New developments in the meeting between the country's presidential candidates and Catholic bishops. And yes to life. Thousands take to the streets in Madrid in an annual rally against the culture of death. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, why President Joe Biden was holding a campaign meeting at the Teamsters headquarters in Washington, D.C. today. He was the focus of a fiery and intense hearing on Capitol Hill. Special counsel Robert Hur testified before the House Judiciary Committee about his investigation into the president's handling of classified documents. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
That's right, Tracy. And you'll recall just recently, Robert Hur concluded in his report that President Biden should face no criminal charges over his mishandling of documents after he left the vice presidency. Now, Republicans are angry over the decision not to charge the president, but Democrats are furious over how the president's memory was presented.
My team and I conducted a thorough, independent investigation.
On Capitol Hill, special counsel Robert Hur defends his work and report that questioned President Joe Biden's age and mental competence, but recommended no criminal charges.
My assessment in the report about the relevance of the president's memory was necessary and accurate and fair.
The hearing, playing out as a newly released transcript of Biden's testimony last fall, shows that he repeatedly insisted he never meant to retain classified information after he left the vice presidency. It did not take long for both Republicans and Democrats to fire away.
The answer to my earlier question is correct. All I have to do when I'm caught taking home classified materials to say, I'm sorry, Mr. Herbert, but I'm getting old. My memory's not so great.
Congressman,
this is the doctrine that you've established in our laws now, and it's frightening.
Congressman, my intent is certainly not to establish any sort of doctrine. I had a particular task. I have a particular set of evidence to consider and make a judgment with respect to one particular set of evidence, and that is what I did.
Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin weighed in as well.
With such a striking contrast, our colleagues have switched over from being impeachment investigators for constitutional high crimes and misdemeanors, which is how this whole thing started, to being amateur memory specialists, giving us their drive-by diagnoses of the President of the United States.
Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler defended President Biden's mental acuity and then rolled a video of Donald Trump ripping the former president's mental sharpness.
I like besitos. We have languages coming into our country. We have nobody that even speaks those languages. They're truly foreign languages. Nobody speaks them. Saudi Arabia and Russia will repeat your...
But Republican Committee Chairman Jim Jordan says the Hur report boils down to a few key facts.
Joe Biden broke the law, but because he's a forgetful old man who would appear sympathetic to a jury, Mr. Hur chose not to bring charges.
Now, on Thursday, Trump himself is facing a hearing in the criminal case involving classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Today's testimony on Capitol Hill was meant to clear up lingering questions about Hur's report, and that report arriving as both President Biden and former President Trump are on the cusp of claiming their party's nominations. And then it's on to November of 2024. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Staying on Capitol Hill, a bipartisan group of lawmakers met with the president of Poland today. President Andrzej Duda is seeking more funding for the war in Ukraine. Separately, the Pentagon says that it will give Ukraine $300 million in weapons. This comes despite the U.S. military being deeply overdrawn and needing at least $10 billion to replenish the weapons that it has already provided. All right, moving on to the war in the Middle East now, where an aid ship loaded with around 200 tons of food is on its way to Gaza. This is seen as a test of a corridor that could lead to further aid deliveries. The United States, along with other nations, are providing airdrops as hunger is worsening in the region. The war is now into its 5th month and has resulted in the deaths of more than 30,000 Palestinians and pushed hundreds of thousands to starvation. This comes as the Vatican has increased its call for an end to the war.
The Holy See, like many actors within the international community, would have liked to have seen significant progress on a ceasefire before the beginning of Ramadan, and many people were pushing for that. We will continue to engage with our friends in the international community in that sense.
During a joint news conference yesterday with Jordan's Foreign Minister, Archbishop Paul Gallagher said the Vatican supports the United Nations' efforts to bring relief to Gaza. He added that Pope Francis believes the conflict must end and has asked that churches and civilians be spared. Also today, the Israeli military announced dual U.S.-Israeli citizen Itay Chen was killed during the October 7th Hamas terror attack and that his remains were taken into Gaza. Chen was one of 6 U.S. citizens thought to have been held alive in Gaza, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family. All right, for more, let's bring in Simone Leedon, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Simone, good to be with you. We are now, as we said, 5 months into this war between Israel and Hamas, and it really seems like there's no end in sight anytime soon. How long do you think this conflict could go on?
Well, I think the sooner that the Biden administration provides Israel what it needs to win and stops pressuring them for these pauses, I think the sooner that this conflict will end. At the outset, the Israeli government outlined their 3 goals for this war. And very slowly, the Biden administration has been rolling back its support for those 3 goals, which are the destruction of Hamas, the hostages return, and Gaza no longer being a place from which attacks against Israel could take place.
Yeah, and Simone, we've heard, a lot recently about red lines. President Biden said that Israel's military operation Rafah, well, that would be a red line. And then, of course, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his forces will go into Rafah and that his red line was October 7th, and he wants to prevent that from ever happening again. And both leaders are obviously at odds with their red lines. That said, do you think an Israeli military operation in Rafah, do you think that could cause a shift in U.S. policy?
It would be difficult to imagine a clear break of U.S. policy. So I think this talk of red lines from the part of President Biden and members of his administration is mostly geared toward a domestic political audience, given that it's an election year. I think it's clear that Israel is going into Rafah. There's a 90% domestic approval rating within Israel to destroy Hamas. So they're not going to stop. They are going into Rafah. And I don't think that the Biden administration is serious about that being a red line in terms of the United States support for Israel or its continuation of any type of support, really.
Simone, I want to talk about this, about Ramadan. How much of a factor is that in the current state of the war? I mean, does it impact Israel's approach to this at all?
Ramadan is an important factor. I think it's important to look at the statements made by the leaders of Hamas with respect to Ramadan, where they've said that they are going to be increasing violence during this period. And so I think that is a very clear signal to Israel and to us that we should expect actually increase in violence during this period.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to bring this up. We mentioned the man who was dead, Mr. Chen. Any other information about any, hostages that are being currently held by Hamas? Do we have any updates there?
As you mentioned, there were 6 Americans believed to be held hostage still in Gaza. Unfortunately, with the reported murder of Itay, that's down to 5. But, the Hamas is using these hostages, obviously, as a political tool, and they're using it to continually torture the Israeli public, Jews worldwide who are distraught by this situation, and also the United States. They're holding American hostages. They're holding other foreign hostages. And so it's another tool in their toolkit that they're using in this reign of terror, and it must be stopped, and Israel must be supported in its invasion and in its operation in Rafah to end the conflict and end the suffering. of both Palestinians and Israelis.
Well, Simone, so good to be with you today. Thank you so much for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Prime Minister of Haiti says that he will resign, but only after a transitional government has been created. This as the Caribbean nation is overwhelmed with gang violence.
Accepter pour le mettre en place un conseil présidentiel de transition.
The Prime Minister has received international pressure to step down after gangs led an insurrection calling for his removal and released thousands of inmates from 2 prisons. The Presidential Council, once set, will appoint an interim prime minister until an election takes place. Presidential candidates in Mexico have signed an agreement with the country's Catholic bishops. They are proposing strategies to reduce the violence during the early voting in one of the largest government elections in the nation's history. The frontrunner, Claudia Sheinbaum, did not agree with some of the criticisms of the current president, saying, quote, "I do not share the pessimistic evaluation of the current moment. Church leaders are pushing back against organized crime and drug cartels." And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including a big day in politics with 4 presidential contests happening today. But the one in Georgia is on the minds of both the Biden and Trump campaigns. And a look at some trouble facing one of the largest airplane manufacturers. Welcome back. Another round of primaries today, and enough delegates are at stake that both President Biden and former President Trump could clinch their party's 2024 nominations. Hawaii is holding GOP caucuses today, while Washington, Mississippi, and Georgia are holding their state primaries for both Republicans and Democrats. But the main focus is on the Peach State, with 16 electoral votes. And joining us now is Professor Andra Gillespie, political science professor at Emory University in Atlanta. Professor, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. So tell us what you'll be paying attention to as the primary results start rolling in tonight.
Well, I assume that the primary results are going to affirm that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to win their respective primaries by large margins. I will pay attention to see how many people have participated in voting. It's important to keep in mind that there's been early voting that's gone on in Georgia for the last few weeks, and that actually predates Nikki Haley dropping out of the race and even Dean Phillips dropping out of the race on the Democratic side. So there are many people who cast their ballots ahead of knowing that the fields had largely been cleared, but I do want to see how many people show up today. That certainly is going to be a test of the strength of organization for both parties in terms of get out the vote and mobilization, but it is not sort of a clear indication of everything. Both parties are going to have to start from scratch and make sure that they get people to turn out to vote in November.
Yeah, and how important is Georgia? And what's at stake there in the state?
Well, when we think about how battleground states get chosen, it gets chosen based on previous information. And so right now, the previous information includes the results of the 2020 election. And so right now, the focus is on states that were decided by very narrow margins in 2020. So Georgia's included in that, as well as Arizona and Nevada and Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. But that's going to get updated over time. And so what people are going to be paying attention to are the polls in the states. Right now, though President Trump is ahead in the polls, those polls are usually within the statistical margin of error. So that means statistically they're tied. And so as long as the margins are so close that there isn't one clear presumptive winner in the state, both campaigns are going to feel justified in investing resources in the state. Democrats have to win Georgia. Otherwise, they probably won't win the election. And if Republicans were to lose the state, even though there still might be a path to 270 that doesn't include Georgia, it would be a huge psychological blow to Republicans who have consistently won this state, 2020 not accepting for the last generation.
Yeah, and I know Georgia really has grown a lot according to state projections. Since about 2020, the state has had about 375,000 residents. How does this influx of new people coming to the state, how does that impact things at the polls? And any indication of how, these new voters, which way they may vote?
Yeah, so if we go back over the last 20 years, what we've seen is that a lot of voters who have relocated to Georgia tend to be Democratic leaning in their orientation. In the 2000s, it was African Americans seeking economic opportunity, primarily in Metro Atlanta, who came back to the state or were coming back to their ancestral homelands, who brought their Democratic politics with them. And in more recent decades, we've seen Asian American and Latino voters who have relocated to the states. We've seen a more than doubling of the number of Asian American and Latino voters in the state. And while they're not 90% Democratic like African Americans are, they still tend to break more Democratic than Republican. In addition, if we think about industries like technology or film and television, these are industries that tend to attract more Democratic leaning voters of any race. So even when we think about whites who have moved to the state, these aren't always conservative Republican voting whites who are coming to the state. So Georgia looks more multiracial and it looks more liberal in its orientation than its neighbors in the Deep South.
All right, and we're going to be watching to see what happens tonight. Professor Gillespie, great to be with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, the Senate Intelligence Committee heard testimony that the United States faces a long list of global threats. They are worried about the situation in Ukraine, danger on the southern border, and China's possible influence on U.S. elections. On top of that, the use of emerging technologies like AI and TikTok.
The threat of malign actors exploiting these tools and technologies to undercut U.S. interests and democracy is particularly potent as voters go to the poll in more than 60 elections around the globe this year.
She added China may attempt to influence U.S. elections to magnify social divisions. And in another hotspot, CIA Director William Burns warned Ukraine is at a crossroads.
With supplemental assistance, Ukraine can put itself in a position by the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025, where it could regain the offensive initiative and also put itself in a position to negotiate from a position of greater strength. Without supplemental assistance in 2024, you're going to see more of Divkas. And that, it seems to me, would be a massive and historic mistake for the United States.
The chairman of the Intelligence Committee agrees.
And my fear is the decision thus far by the House of Representatives not to even take up legislation that would support Ukraine in their fight against Putin aggression has been one of the most short-sighted decisions on a national security issue that I can possibly imagine.
Nearer to home, many migrants continue to illegally cross the U.S. southern border, while cartels smuggle drugs, weapons, and people with terrorist connections.
You know, there is a particular network that has, where some of the overseas facilitators of the smuggling network have ISIS ties that we're very concerned about.
Senator Marco Rubio says these threats are all interconnected.
The goals that Russia has, the goal that Iran has, the goal that North Korea has, the role that the Chinese have, may be different goals. But one of the real developments that threaten the security of our country is that they are increasingly partnering with one another.
Intelligence officials also warned the war in Gaza and the resulting humanitarian crisis means it is likely that the conflict will result in a rise of terrorism. Groups including al-Qaeda and ISIS have directed supporters to conduct attacks against Israeli and American interests. Boeing's year just went from bad to worse. The safety of its planes are being called into question after a series of incidents. An investigation is underway over the latest incident. Several passengers say that they were thrown around the cabin on a flight traveling from Sydney to Auckland. People on board said the plane made a violent drop and it felt like being on a roller coaster. Officials say that it was caused by a technical problem. One passenger said he spoke to the pilot.
And then the pilot came to the back. And I said to him, I said, what happened? And he said, my instruments, I just lost them. He goes, just for a few seconds, they went blank.
All right, for more, let's bring in Captain Shem Malmquist. He is a visiting instructor at the Florida Institute of Technology and also a Boeing 777 captain as well. He's also the author of Grounded, How to Solve the Aviation Crisis. Sir, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. We just heard one passenger describe how the pilot came out and said the instruments just went blank. Do we know what happened here, and how concerned should we be?
But we definitely, at this point, do not know what happened. There are several different possibilities. Some could involve the flight controls, such as happened several years back to a Boeing 777 off the coast of Australia, Also an Airbus, actually A330, in the same location or very close to that same location. And those were both flight control anomalies causing pitch changes. But it's also possible that there was some type of instrument issue or some other factor. We really do not have enough information at this point other than what the pilot reported or what was reported that the pilot said.
I also want to touch on this. Earlier this year, a door plug on a 737 MAX 9 plane blew out right in mid-flight. And just yesterday, the FAA announced that they had found problems at Boeing's manufacturing plant. The FAA warned that those problems really did need to be corrected by late May, or they may be shut down. And so I ask, should they be worried if they're flying on a Boeing plane?
Well, at this point, in my own opinion, I'm not concerned about flying an airplane. There are some issues. It seems apparent at this point that we're looking at cultural factors that affect the entire operation. But in general, the aircraft are still very safe. And despite some of these issues, I personally would have no problems about flying on any of the airplanes.
Do you think any of this will possibly impact passengers, maybe flight delays or maybe the cost of flights? Will they go up because of all of this?
Well, potentially, yes, depending on what happens and what actions happen. If FAA is not satisfied and some of the aircraft end up being grounded for some period of time, that is going to reduce capacity, and reductions of capacity will generally be reflected in ticket prices. So I would not be surprised to see that, particularly in light of how tight the system is right now. Airplanes are already at maximum capacity, everything is full. And so it really does not take very much to push ticket prices up.
Shem, can you put this into context for us? Obviously, this is very concerning to a lot of people that something like this would happen during a flight. But how common is this?
Well, fortunately, it really is not common. There's different factors that can lead to aircraft. Something like just happened with the airplane suddenly apparently pitching over or losing altitude. Generally, that has to do with unexpected encounters with turbulence, and that is an ongoing factor with particularly climate change increasing the number of cases or the significance of the weather. We can expect to see increases for that type of factor. In terms of flight control problems, these are much more rare, fortunately. There is extensive testing that is done prior to the aircraft being certified and flying. And every once in a while, things do happen in service. We've seen this over the years with these newer airplanes that have a lot of electronic controls. A lot of this and understanding how the electronics work and even conducting the hazard analysis requires some different methods than have been used in the past.
Sir, thank you so much for your time today and for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your time.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, 9-month Novena, an initiative begins today aimed at seeking help from Our Lady. Plus, thousands take to the streets of Madrid to say yes to life. A judge in Kansas says that it is not discrimination to refuse to allow people to change their driver's licenses to reflect their so-called gender identity. The ruling keeps in place an order first issued last year. It also rejects the argument that the policy violates a constitutionally protected right to bodily autonomy. Thousands of pro-lifers took to the streets of Madrid in this year's March for Life against abortion and euthanasia. This year's theme is simple but powerful. Yes to life. The event featured powerful testimonies of people sharing their stories of choosing life, including one from a woman whose 26-year-old brother is 96% disabled. She said encouragingly, just because life isn't easy doesn't make it any less beautiful indeed. Well, finally tonight, a big day for an initiative we recently discussed here on EWTN News Nightly. Today is the start of the 9-month novena to pray for the church. Cardinal Raymond Burke is leading the initiative. He says that he is calling on the faithful to return to Our Lady. He called for the novena amid many problems in the world. He adds that this spiritual exercise will hopefully turn people away from discouragement. The novena will end December 12th, the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. For more information, log on to novena.cardinalburke.com. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.